Imagine standing outside a tomb in the Middle East. It is, it's 90 degrees.
Easily 90 degrees, yeah.
Right, the sun is just beating down on the dust. And inside that rock, a man has been dead for 4 days.
4 days, which is significant.
Oh, massively significant. The smell of decomposition is literally hanging in the air. You've got this crowd of mourners weeping loudly, and the strict religious purity laws are, they're basically screaming at everyone to keep their distance.
Right, do not touch.
Exactly. And then a carpenter steps up to the stone and speaks. Now, today, we aren't just looking at what he said. We are hacking into the Greek source code of, how he said it.
Yeah, we're looking at the underlying grammatical architecture, basically the actual mechanics of how the author constructed reality using the Greek language.
Right.
Specifically in the Gospel of John, chapter 11, verses 1 through 44, the famous story of the raising of Lazarus.
Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today for you, listening right now, is a really exciting one. I mean, we are exploring this massive, exhaustive, 24-module linguistic and exegetical breakdown of this historical text.
It's a huge source document.
It is.
Yeah.
But we're looking at it through a very specific lens. We want to answer a precise question. How do verbal aspect and discourse analysis actually deepen our understanding of this text?
Right. And perhaps more importantly, how does that grammatical knowledge help us communicate the story more accurately and, well, more powerfully?
Exactly. Because reading a text like this without understanding its discourse structure is, well, it's like watching a brilliant movie on mute.
That analogy captures the problem perfectly, I think. You can see the visual plot points, right? But you are entirely missing the emotional and structural cues.
Right. The cues that tell you how to process those events. You see the action. You see people crying. You see the sisters mourning. You see a guy wrapped in grave clothes coming out of a tomb.
Yeah.
But you miss the soundtrack. You miss the swelling strings that tell you what to feel. Or that sudden, jarring silence that tells you exactly where to focus.
Right, or the musical motifs that signal a twist in the narrative.
Yeah, the grammar is the soundtrack. And today, we're turning the volume all the way up on the grammar.
Love it. To accomplish that, though, we have to establish the context of the source material we're working with.
Sure, but lay it out for us.
So this 24-module breakdown relies heavily on 2 specific analytical frameworks. First, Constantine Campbell's model of verbal aspect, and second, systemic functional linguistics.
Which is often abbreviated as SFL.
Yeah,
right?
exactly, SFL. What this means for anyone studying this text is that we are deliberately stripping away centuries of theological assumptions.
Okay.
We're stepping past the English translation habits that we have all just gotten so used to over the years.
Right, the stuff we just gloss over.
Yeah. We are looking purely at how the verbs, the clauses, and the shifts in narrative build a highly specific, highly calibrated argument. We are letting the grammar dictate the meaning.
Rather than imposing our own expectations onto the text.
Yeah.
I like that. I want to tackle that first framework you mentioned, though, because, and I'll just be honest, verbal aspect sounds suspiciously like something that gets written on a chalkboard in, like a terrifying graduate school seminar.
It definitely can be taught that way, yeah.
Right. And I know how English works, mostly anyway.
Yeah.
We are obsessed with time in English.
Oh, completely.
We want to know exactly when something happened. Yesterday, today, or tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's past, present, or future tense.
Yeah.
But reading through the source material, it seems like the Greek language, or at least how this framework analyzes it, doesn't really care about the clock in the same way.
Not at all. The Greek language's relationship with time is totally foreign to how we structure sentences in English.
Right.
Yeah, in the model proposed by Constantine Campbell, which our source data uses as its foundation, the Greek verb is far more concerned with aspect than it is with tense.
Okay, unpack aspect for me.
Aspect is not about when the action happens on a timeline. It is about how the action is portrayed by the author. It's a subjective choice.
Interesting.
It represents the author's viewpoint. Think of it as the lens through which they want you to view the event.
Okay, let me try to map this out visually. Say I'm thinking about a parade moving down Main Street.
Sure, good example.
If I'm standing right there on the curb, getting bumped by the crowd, watching the marching band go by, seeing the floats pass me one by one, I mean, I am right in the middle of the action.
Right, you're experiencing it.
Yeah, I'm watching it unfold progressively. I can smell the exhaust from the floats. That feels like an ongoing developing state.
That is the perfect illustration of imperfective aspect.
Yeah.
You are experiencing the duration and the progression of the event from the inside.
But if I take an elevator to the top of a skyscraper, or I'm in a helicopter 1,000 feet above the city, I see the entire parade from the staging area to the finish line as a single, complete unit.
Exactly. It's just one long, colorful line on the street. And that helicopter view is perfective aspect.
Okay. Helicopter versus street level.
Right. The author is choosing whether to put the reader on the street corner feeling the progression of the moment or up in the helicopter viewing the event as a summarized whole.
And how does Greek do the helicopter view?
In Greek narrative, that helicopter view is achieved using the aorist verb form.
A-O-R-I-S-T.
Yes, aorist. The aorist is a perfective aspect. It presents actions as summary wholes, regardless of how long they actually took to happen in real time.
So in terms of storytelling?
In storytelling, the aorist is the mainline. It is the engine that drives the plot forward from one event to the next.
Oh, I get it. It's the fast-forward button on the remote control. You just click, click, click to the next major plot point.
Exactly. Our source data points out highly specific, pivotal examples of this aorist fast-forwarding in the text.
Like what?
Well, in verse 3, the sisters sending the message to Jesus. That is an aorist verb.
It doesn't focus on the journey of the messenger.
Right. It just summarizes the event. Boom, message sent. Verse 6, Jesus hearing the message. Verse 16, the disciples are raving.
Just clicking through the events.
Yeah. Verse 39, the physical removal of the stone from the tomb. Verse 42, Jesus giving the loud cry. The Greek there is ekrogasin.
Ekrogasin.
Yes. And verse 43, Lazarus coming out, exelthen. All of these are aorist. They are the major structural beats propelling the story forward as completed, discrete events.
So if the aorist verbs are the helicopter view, the fast-forward button that moves the plot from A to B to C, what puts us back down on the street corner?
Right, you want to pause.
Yeah, if I want to pause the fast-forward and actually look around the scene, how does the Greek grammar do that?
The author achieves that street-level view by shifting to imperfective aspect. This typically utilizes imperfect or present tense forms in a narrative context.
Yeah.
This shift provides the background. It establishes the setting, the ongoing states, or the duration of an event. It's the pause button where the reader is meant to look around and feel the environment.
Give me an example of that in the Lazarus story.
Well, the text uses imperfective verbs to describe the ongoing, worsening illness of Lazarus at the very beginning.
It doesn't just say he got sick as a single event.
Right, exactly. It paints a picture of an ongoing state. He was sick and getting sicker. It also uses imperfective verbs to describe the agonizing delay of Jesus.
Oh, when he waits the 2 days.
Yes. The text says he was staying 2 days in the place where he was. It emphasizes the duration. The author also uses it for geographical scene setting.
Like saying how far Bethany was from Jerusalem.
Exactly. Noting that Bethany being near Jerusalem was about 2 miles away. These verbs do not advance the plot toward the resurrection. They paint the scenery, they set the mood, and build the tension.
You absolutely need that background painted before you can watch the characters run across the stage.
Right, without it, there's no depth.
And the tension of Jesus just staying where he is while his friend is dying requires that ongoing street-level view.
Yeah.
But, and here's where I got tripped up, as I was reading the source analysis on this, I hit a massive grammatical speed bump.
The historical present.
Yes, the historical present. It seems to violently break the rules we just laid out. Because suddenly, right in the middle of this past tense narrative, Jesus is speaking, and the author uses a present tense verb. It really threw me off.
It throws a lot of people off, but the historical present is actually one of the most crucial structural findings in the entire source document.
Okay, break it down for me.
In Greek narrative, an author will sometimes use a present tense verb, which, remember, inherently carries that imperfective street corner aspect to describe a past event. Specifically, the author of the Gospel of John uses the Greek word legei.
Legei, which means?
It literally translates to he says. Not he said, but he says.
Oh, I see. It reminds me of how people tell stories at a bar or, like, a dinner party.
Exactly. How so?
Well, you never say, and then I walked down the street and a man approached me and he said to me.
Right, nobody talks like that.
You say, so I'm walking down the street and this guy comes up to me and he says. It breaks the formality of the timeline and yanks the listener right into the immediate present.
That's spot on. The linguistic term for that is vividness.
Vividness. I like that.
It is a deliberate literary device. The author frequently deploys this historical present, the legei, to foreground key speech acts and pivotal movements in the dialogue.
So it brings the conversation right up to your face.
Literally, it takes you out of the helicopter view of the narrative, fast forward, and suddenly drops you right onto the street corner, inches away from the characters' mouths.
Wow. Let's map that onto the text we are looking at. If the aorist verbs are the fast forward getting us to the tomb, and the regular imperfects are the pause buttons setting the scene, why does the author suddenly switch to the historical present, right before the biggest, most dramatic moments?
Well, what do you think?
Because reading it, it almost feels like a literary jump scare. Everything is moving along, and then suddenly, bam, the grammar gets right in your face.
Conceptualizing it as a literary jump scare is brilliant, honestly, because that is exactly the psychological effect the grammar is designed to produce.
Okay, so it's very intentional.
Oh, entirely. And understanding this is essential for anyone trying to communicate the text. The aspectual foregrounding, using that sudden, jarring present tense lege, happens right before Jesus gives commands at the tomb in verses 36, 38, and 44.
So it's pointing an arrow right at those moments.
Yes, the grammar is grabbing the reader by the collar and screaming, "Pay attention to this exact moment."
It's the swelling strings in the movie soundtrack.
Yeah.
It's the director turning the volume up to 11 right before the crucial line of dialogue.
Right. And it forces a massive theological realization when you view the story as a whole.
What's the realization?
The physical miracle itself, the actual raising of a dead body, the stone moving, Lazarus walking out, all of those are aorists.
They're just the summary events.
Yeah.
Fast forward mainline.
Exactly. But the words of Jesus, the commands he issues to the crowd and to the dead man, those are foregrounded using the historical present. The grammatical structure dictates that the physical miracle is actually subordinated to the words of Jesus.
That is a total paradigm shift. I mean, think about what this means for you, the listener, if you were reading this on your own or preparing to teach it or just trying to understand the historical impact of the document.
It changes everything about how you pace it.
It really does. The natural human instinct is to rush through the talking parts to get to the special effects, right? We all want to see the zombie-like emergence from the tomb.
We want the cinematic payoff.
Yes. We want the guy wrapped in bandages walking out into the sunlight. But the Greek source code is actively fighting against that instinct. The grammar demands that you slow down and spotlight the speech.
The speech is the main event. The miracle is just there to validate the speech, not the other way around. The words create the reality.
Okay, so the verbs act as a camera, shifting us from a helicopter view of the action to a tight, intimate close-up on the dialogue. But who is the camera actually pointed at? Who is driving this action?
That brings us to the discourse shifts.
Right, because the source material dives into something called discourse shifts and ideational roles. And reading through it felt less like reading a theology textbook and more like reading a script breakdown for a stage play.
That script breakdown feel comes from the second major framework the source uses, which is systemic functional linguistics, or SFL.
Okay, SFL again.
SFL doesn't just look at language as a set of arbitrary rules to be memorized. It views language as a complex system of choices that an author makes to construct meaning and reality.
Like choosing tools from a toolbox.
Exactly. And one of the most powerful lenses SFL provides is called the ideational metafunction.
You're going to have to translate ideational metafunction into English for me, because that sounds incredibly dense.
It sounds worse than it is. At its core, the ideational metafunction asks three simple questions of any text. What is going on? Who is involved? And what are the circumstances?
Okay, so what are the actual actions in the Greek sentences?
To figure that out, we categorize the verbs into process types.
So we are breaking down the actions in the story and putting them into different buckets to see what kind of action is dominating the scene.
That's a great way to put it. The source analysis reveals that John 11 is overwhelmingly dominated by two specific types of processes.
Which are?
First, you have material processes. These are physical actions occurring in the real world: walking, weeping, dying, rolling stones away. Second, you have verbal processes, which are acts of speaking, declaring, or praying.
So on one hand, we have the physical movement of bodies and objects, and on the other hand, we have dialogue, material and verbal.
Right. But the real revelation comes when SFL maps out who is assigned to these processes. When we look at the grammar of the entire passage, Jesus is overwhelmingly categorized as the actor in the material processes.
He's the one doing the physical stuff.
He is the one walking, arriving, initiating movement. He is also overwhelmingly the sayer in the verbal processes. And he is the primary censor in the mental and emotional processes.
So he just dominates every category.
Completely. Jesus controls the physical action. He controls the speech. He controls the emotional response of the narrative.
He's the ultimate agent of the story.
Hmm.
He is the gravity that everything else revolves around.
Grammatically, he is the undisputed engine of the entire pericope. He initiates, he does not merely respond.
But wait, if Jesus is the primary actor, sayer, and censor,
Hmm.
what is everyone else doing? I mean, you have a huge cast of characters here. You have Martha, Mary, the disciples, a massive crowd of mourners from Jerusalem. What bucket do they fall into?
The supporting cast primarily functions as goals.
Goals, like a soccer goal.
No, in the terminology of SFL, a goal is the entity that receives the action. The actor acts upon the goal. Alternatively, the supporting characters function as censors who are merely reacting to the circumstances surrounding them.
So they're not driving the plot.
No, they are not initiating new realities. They are dealing with the reality of death that has been thrust upon them.
The source gives a really striking example of this involving the two sisters, Martha and Mary.
Yes, it is one of the most poignant moments in the text. Both Martha and Mary, at completely different times in the narrative, fall before Jesus and utter the exact same conditional lament.
Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died.
Precisely.
Which is such a deeply human, recognizable reaction. It is the bargaining phase of grief. It's a reaction to a devastating circumstance that they had absolutely no control over.
Right, they are looking at the past and wishing the variables had been different.
Yeah, and grammatically.
Grammatically, that conditional lament positions them as completely reactive. They are bound by the immovable reality of death and the progression of time. They are stuck in what has already happened.
But Jesus isn't.
Right. Jesus' material and verbal responses do not merely react to that reality. He doesn't join them in wishing the past were different. He initiates an entirely new reality that overrides the circumstances they are bound by.
I keep going back to that idea of stage blocking in a play.
It's a really apt metaphor.
It sounds like Jesus is the only character who is actually allowed to walk freely around the stage, and everyone else is just tethered to their marks, reacting to the space he takes up.
That's exactly what the grammar shows us.
But how does knowing this ideational structure, knowing who the active actor is, change how we read the emotional beats of the story? Because a very common popular reading of this text is that Jesus arrives, sees everyone crying, gets swept up in the profound sadness of losing his friend, and just breaks down weeping.
Right, Jesus wept. The shortest verse in the Bible.
Exactly. It's often preached as a story of Jesus's intense empathy and shared helplessness in the face of grief, like he's just overwhelmed by sadness.
The discourse analysis provides a definitive, robust challenge to that popular reading, actually. We have to look closely at Jesus's emotional disturbance in verses 30 and 35.
Okay, what does the Greek say?
The Greek phrase used to describe his internal state is enibremesato to pneumati. English Bibles often translate this smoothly as deeply moved in spirit.
Which sounds very gentle and sad.
It does, but the Greek verb embrimaumai carries a much darker, more violent connotation.
Violent, really?
Yeah, it implies a deep, almost visceral internal churning. It was historically used to describe the snorting of a horse in anger or preparation for battle.
Wow.
It denotes indignation and outrage, not just passive sadness.
So it's not a single stoic tear rolling down his cheek. It's a physical, chest-heaving reaction. He's visibly angry.
The grammar fully supports your instinct there. Even in his grief, which SFL categorizes as a behavioral or mental process, Jesus remains the active initiator.
He's not just absorbing the mood of the crowd.
Exactly. The linguistic evidence proves this isn't a story of Jesus being swept away by a tragic event. He is not a passive victim of the atmosphere of mourning. His grief is an active, initiated response to the violation of death and the unbelief of the crowd.
He is deliberately, aggressively marching toward a revelatory confrontation with death itself.
Yes.
He isn't crying because he feels helpless. He is angry at the enemy of death, and he's actively stepping onto the battlefield to do something about it. That completely changes the tone of the entire scene.
It's a radical shift in perspective.
It changes the characterization from a grieving friend to a warrior walking into a fight.
He is the active actor and sayer from verse 1 all the way to verse 44. The grammar simply does not allow for a passive Jesus in this text.
Okay, if we accept that Jesus is the primary actor and sayer, and that he is initiating this confrontation, how exactly does he speak when he goes into battle? Because the source goes deep into the interpersonal grammar here, and it is fascinating.
It really is. SFL uses interpersonal analysis to look at the power dynamics encoded in speech.
So how characters talk to each other to establish who's in charge.
Right. It examines how characters relate to one another, establish hierarchy, and exert influence through the language they choose. And the source notes something highly significant about Jesus' speech throughout this narrative.
Which is?
It possesses positive polarity and zero modality.
Okay, I am going to need an analogy for zero modality because that sounds like a setting on a washing machine. What does it mean for speech to have modality?
Modality is the linguistic tool we use to soften our speech. We use it to express uncertainty or to politely navigate social hierarchies.
Give me an example.
Well, if we are in an office and I need you to send me a file, I probably won't just say, send the file.
No, that would be pretty aggressive.
Right. I will use modal softening. I will say, would you mind sending over that file when you have a second? Or could you possibly email that to me?
Okay, I see.
That is modality. It is polite. It creates a cushion. Most importantly, it acknowledges that you have the agency to say no.
It's social lubrication. It's how we keep from offending each other in a civilized society.
Exactly. And Jesus uses absolutely zero modality in this text.
None.
He utilizes zero social lubrication. When he wants something done, he issues blunt, unadorned, direct imperatives.
Let's hear the Greek.
Go, men! Let us go! Orate, take away the stone! Duro exo, come out, lissate, untie him.
So he doesn't look at the crowd and say, hey, everyone, I know this is a huge imposition and it's super uncomfortable given the smell, but if it's not too much trouble, could someone maybe help roll this stone away?
Not at all.
He just barks a raw command into the crowd.
The authority is absolute and unquestioned. He does not negotiate with the reality in front of him. He commands it.
Wow.
Furthermore, the analysis points out fascinating person shifts in his dialogue.
What does that mean?
Jesus fluidly, seamlessly shifts between absolute first-person singular statements, I am, I know, I thank you, and highly intimate second-person direct addresses.
He doesn't preach to the crowd in vague generalities.
Right. He speaks directly to Martha, directly to God the Father, and directly to the dead body of Lazarus.
It's an incredible mix of supreme authority and piercing intimacy. He's commanding the laws of nature, but he is doing it while looking specific individuals right in the eye.
Which brings us to perhaps the most revealing grammatical structure in the entire text.
The textual metafunction.
Yes, the textual metafunction, and specifically the concept of theme rime.
Oh man, this was easily my favorite part of the source material. I found myself reading this section twice. Break down theme rime for us, because it sounds like a poetry concept, but it's actually about how sentences are built.
Yeah, in linguistic terms, the theme is the point of departure for a clause. It is what the clause is about.
The starting point.
Functionally, it is the first element you encounter in the sentence. The rime is the rest of the sentence. It is the new information being provided about that theme.
Okay.
Now, in normal, unmarked Greek prose, the standard word order is verb, subject, object. The action usually comes first.
I want to pause here to make sure this is crystal clear, because English doesn't work this way at all.
Now, English is very rigid.
In English, word order is everything. The dog bit the man means something completely different than the man bit the dog. We rely on the order of the words to know who is doing what.
Right. But Greek is a highly inflected language. The endings of the words, the suffixes, tell you if a word is the subject, the direct object, or the indirect object.
So because the grammatical function is baked into the spelling of the word itself.
A Greek writer can shuffle the words around in almost any order, and the core meaning of who is doing what remains exactly the same.
Okay, so if they don't need a specific word order to convey the basic facts, then anytime they intentionally change the standard word order, they're doing it on purpose.
Exactly.
They're deliberately shoving a word to the front of the sentence to shine a massive spotlight on it.
That intentional front-loading is called a marked theme. The author is manipulating the syntax to create maximum emphasis.
Where do we see that in John 11?
We see the ultimate example of this in the absolute climax of the dialogue between Jesus and Martha in verse 23. Jesus says to her, Ego aimi hi anastasis kai hi zoe.
I am the resurrection and the life.
Yes. He shoves the ego, the I, to the absolute front of the clause.
Let's set the stage for why that structural shift is so devastating. Martha is grieving. Jesus tells her that her brother will rise again, and Martha replies with, I know he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day.
Right.
Now, we need to give Martha credit here. She is giving the standard, orthodox, straight-A theological answer of her first-century Jewish culture. She has her theology completely correct based on everything she has been taught by the religious leaders of her day.
Oh, absolutely. She's textbook perfect.
So how does Jesus' theme rime structural shift Basically dismantle her entire theological worldview right to her face.
We have to look at the timeline Martha's operating on. Martha's theology is entirely future-oriented. For her, the resurrection is an event on a calendar. It is a what and a when that will happen at the end of history. But her future tense, event-based theology is violently interrupted by Jesus's present tense, Mark theme reality.
He interrupts her timeline. He pulls the future into the present.
He fundamentally reorients the entire concept. Notice what he doesn't say.
What doesn't he say?
He doesn't say, I will cause the resurrection. He doesn't say, I have the power to bring about the resurrection on the last day.
Right, he doesn't point to a future action.
No. By placing ego, the I, as the point of departure, the theme, and he anastasis kai he zoe, the resurrection and the life, as the new information, the rame, he shatters the paradigm.
Wow.
The resurrection is no longer a future calendar date to wait for. It is a present person standing directly in front of her.
Think about what this means if you are trying to communicate this text to an audience today.
Yeah.
You absolutely have to capture this linguistic interruption.
You really do.
This isn't just a comforting pastoral pat on the back. It's not a theological platitude meant to make a grieving woman feel a little bit better about the afterlife.
Not at all.
It is a radical, absolute, terrifying claim of authority over the very fabric of reality. He is standing in front of a woman whose brother is rotting in a cave, and he is saying, that cosmic event you are waiting for at the end of time, you are looking at him. I am the event.
The grammar forces the reader to confront the person of Jesus, not just his actions or his teachings. The marked theme demands a decision from the listener.
We've spent a lot of time zoomed in on the micro level, the verbs, the clauses, the word order, but I want to zoom out and look at how this entire 44-verse passage holds together.
Sure, let's look at the macro structure.
Because the source material talks about cohesion analysis and lexical chains. It's essentially the idea of tracking specific words like breadcrumbs through the whole story to see the path the author is walking us down.
Right. A text is considered cohesive if its individual parts stick together to form a unified, logical whole.
So it doesn't just read like a random collection of sentences.
Exactly. In John 11, the author brilliantly weaves specific lexical chains throughout the narrative. You have the repetition of the name Lazarus, which grounds the story in a specific historical reality. You have the constant contrasting concepts of death and life.
But there are two really big words anchoring everything, right?
Yes. The two most structurally load-bearing words in the entire passage are the Greek words for glory, doxa, and belief, pisteuo. These words are the architectural glue holding the narrative together.
Let's do some word studies here, because looking at the Greek source code adds so much flavor that we lose in English translation. Let's start with doxa, glory.
Okay?
When we use the word glory today, it usually means fame. An athlete wins a championship and gets the glory. It's about reputation, a round of applause, getting your name in the papers. But the source makes it clear that the Johannine use of the word is much heavier than that.
Much heavier. In the Gospel of John, doxa is not an abstract concept of reputation. It is a visible, tangible, overwhelming manifestation of divine power and majesty breaking into the physical world.
It is something you can see with your eyes.
Exactly. When Jesus says in verse 4 that Lazarus' illness is for the glory of God, he's not saying God wants credit for a magic trick.
Right.
He means this horrific situation is the exact canvas upon which God is going to paint a visible, undeniable display of his raw power over the finality of death.
And then there's the word Zoe life.
Zoe in this text is carefully distinguished from mere biological existence.
So he's not just talking about a heart beating and lungs filling with air.
No, it is not mere resuscitation where Lazarus gets a few more years to live before inevitably dying again. Zoe is qualitative. It is eternal, divine life.
It is the indestructible life of the age, to come somehow breaking into the present corruptible world.
That's beautifully said, yes.
And finally, we have pisteual belief, which, if you read the whole Gospel of John, is basically the thesis statement of the entire book, right?
Without a doubt.
I mean, at the end of the Gospel, the author explicitly says, these things are written that you may believe.
It is the ultimate goal of the text, and crucially, pisteuo is not merely cognitive assent.
It's not just checking a box.
Right, it's not agreeing with a set of theological facts. It is an active, deep, relational entrustment of oneself to Jesus. It is staking your entire existence on his identity.
So we have these massive, weighty theological concepts, glory, life, belief, holding the text together. But the grammar and the vocabulary don't exist in a vacuum.
They never do.
They sit inside a very specific social scientific framework. The ancient world had its own cultural gravity, and the source points out two major cultural models at play in this story that we have to understand if we want to grasp the tension.
The honor-shame culture and the purity culture.
Let's look at honor-shame first, because I think modern Westerners really struggle to grasp how powerful this was.
In the first century Mediterranean world, honor was the primary currency of human interaction. It dictated everything. It was more valuable than money.
So when the sisters send the message,
When the sisters send a desperate message to Jesus, they don't just say, Lazarus is sick. They say, Lord, he whom you love is ill.
they are making a direct public appeal to his honor.
Yes, to his honor as a patron and what anthropologists call a fictive kinsman. They're saying, your public honor is intimately tied to the well-being of this family. You are obligated to show up and protect your own.
I want to create a modern equivalent for this for you listening, because otherwise it just sounds like ancient history.
Go for it.
Imagine you were in the emergency room. Your spouse is in critical condition. You call your absolute best friend in the world, someone who has the power to help. Maybe they are a world-renowned doctor. You leave a frantic voicemail. We need you now.
Right.
And your best friend gets the message and intentionally goes to play golf for 2 days while your spouse dies.
Ouch.
That is the level of relational betrayal we were talking about here. Jesus staying where he was for 2 more days isn't just a slight delay in his travel itinerary. It is scandalous.
It is a calculated risk of immense public shame. By delaying, he is deliberately failing his clients. He is failing his closest friends in the most public way possible.
And people are watching.
Oh, everyone is watching. There is an entire crowd of professional mourners and community leaders who have traveled from Jerusalem to Bethany. They are all watching to see what this famous rabbi will do. His reputation is on the line.
And he just lets it tank.
Yeah.
He bankrupts his social capital. And then, as if the sham wasn't enough, we hit the purity aspect.
The fourth day.
Right. When Jesus finally arrives in Bethany, the situation is completely lost. He walks up to the tomb and issues the blunt command: remove the stone. And Martha, ever the practical sister, objects. She says, Lord, already there is a stench, for he has been dead 4 days.
The Greek word used for 4 days is tetartaios.
Tetartaios. Why does the author include that hyper-specific detail? Why not just say he had been dead for a while?
That word, tetartaios, is absolutely central to the Jewish purity codes and their cultural understanding of death.
How so?
In ancient Jewish rabbinic tradition, it was widely believed that the soul of the deceased hovered near the body for 3 days, hoping to re-enter.
Really? Just hovering?
Yeah, but on the 4th day, the visage of the face began to change. Decomposition visibly and olfactorily began. At that point, the soul departed permanently.
So the 4th day meant absolute, irreversible finality.
Biological and spiritual finality. There was no coming back from day 4.
And Martha points out the smell, the Greek word oze. She's not just covering her nose and saying, ew, it's gross.
No, she is pointing out a massive issue of ritual impurity.
Because touching a corpse, or even being in the same enclosed space as one, made you ceremonially unclean.
It cut you off from the worship life of the community entirely. Opening the sealed tomb of a decomposing body wasn't just a weird request. It was a massive, offensive violation of profound social and religious boundaries.
So if we look at the whole board, it is like a hostage negotiation where the hostage has already been dead for 4 days. The cultural stakes are as high as they can possibly get. The audience of skeptics from Jerusalem is watching. The clock has completely run out. The absolute finality of death has set in, and the stench of decomposition is proving it. When Jesus says remove the stone, he is violating every social, relational, and purity boundary of his day.
He is asking his friends to do something deeply taboo. He is pushing the situation to the absolute breaking point.
But why?
Well, if we connect this extreme social scientific context back to the grammar we discussed earlier, specifically the Heine or Popus clauses, we see something profound about the author's theological agenda.
Remind us about the Heine clauses.
Why did Jesus risk the profound shame of delay? Why did he intentionally push the situation past the 3-day window of hope into the absolute irreversible finality of the 4th day?
The text actually tells us, right?
Jesus explicitly states the purpose in the grammar. In verse 4, he says, the illness is so that Heine, the Son of God, may be glorified.
And in his prayer.
In verse 42, his public prayer in front of the tomb is so that Heine, the crowd, may believe.
The extreme cultural stakes are the whole point.
They have to be.
The 4 days dead, the scandalous delay, the stench, the massive crowd of public mourners. They are completely necessary. They're a feature, not a bug in the plan. They're designed to amplify that lexical chain of glory.
Yes. You cannot have maximum glory without maximum impossibility.
Man, that's good. If Jesus heals Lazarus on day 1, he's just a great doctor. If he raises him on day 4 when he's literally rotting, he is the Lord of life.
That is exactly the theological crescendo the grammar is building toward. The interplay between the extreme cultural stakes and the explicit grammatical purpose clauses shows us the true intent of the author.
This text was not written simply to record a cool historical event where a guy got resuscitated.
Far from it.
Which brings us perfectly to our final synthesis. We've zoomed in on the verbs, the aspect, the clauses, the word order. We've looked at the cultural honor codes and purity laws. Now we need to zoom all the way out. The source material spends some time discussing critical methodologies, specifically source, form, and redaction criticism.
Yeah.
What do these academic tools tell us about how this story was actually put together by the author?
Well, these critical methodologies look at the evolutionary history of a text.
How it grew over time.
Right. And in this case, they suggest that while there very well may have been a traditional miracle story at the historical root of this text, like a simple bare-bones report that Jesus of Nazareth raised a man named Lazarus from the dead, the author of the Gospel of John heavily redacted and transformed that base material.
So he didn't just copy and paste an old newspaper clipping into his book. He took the historical event and reshaped it. How did he change it? What did he add?
He expanded the dialogue drastically, using those historical present tense verbs to foreground the speech.
The logi we talked about earlier.
Right. He inserted the pivotal marked theme, I am the resurrection and the life pronouncement, which shifted the focus from a future event to a present person.
And the prayer?
He added the explanatory public prayer right before the miracle, highlighting the Heine purpose clauses. And he wove the heavy lexical chains of glory and belief throughout the entire 44 verses.
So he took a basic miracle story, a historical nugget, and upgraded it into a towering theological masterpiece.
Yes. The integrative conclusion of all 24 modules of this analysis is this. The grammatical and discourse analysis definitively proves that the physical raising of Lazarus is actually secondary to the revelation of who Jesus is.
Revelation is the point.
In Johannine literature, this is called a sign narrative, not just a miracle story. A miracle is a localized display of power. It helps the person in front of you. A sign points beyond itself to a much greater eternal reality.
So we have to ask the ultimate question. What does this all mean for us?
That's the real question.
Right. If the linguistic data, the aorist verbs, the marked themes, the purpose clauses, proves that the physical miracle is merely the vehicle for the theological message, how should that fundamentally change the way a speaker, a pastor, or just a curious reader approaches this text?
It demands a complete paradigm shift in communication.
How so?
You cannot faithfully communicate this passage merely as a heartwarming, sentimental story of a guy getting his best friend back from the grave. To do so ignores the entire grammatical architecture of the text.
Because the grammar points elsewhere.
Exactly. The relentless focus on Jesus' speech via the historical presence, the Heine purpose clauses pointing constantly away from the miracle and toward belief.
And the structural dismantling of Martha's future tense theology.
Yes. All of this linguistic data demands that the text be communicated as a direct, unavoidable challenge to the reader's own belief system.
The climax of the story isn't Lazarus walking out of the tomb like a mummy.
The true climax of the narrative, grammatically and theologically, is Jesus looking at Martha, and by direct extension, looking at the reader and asking the definitive question in verse 23.
Do you believe this? Wow. Okay, let's wrap up this incredible journey. We started by looking at a text that everyone thinks they know. But we've seen how tracking the verbs, knowing the difference between an aorist fast-forward and an imperfective street-level pause, totally changes the pacing and the tension of a story.
It's all in the pacing.
We've seen how spotting shifts in discourse and tracking who the actor is reveals who is really initiating the reality of the scene. We've seen how tracing lexical chains and marked themes totally unlocks the theological depth of a conversation. Grammar isn't just a set of arbitrary rules you learn in a classroom so you don't fail a test.
Not at all. It is the very architecture of meaning. It is the blueprint of reality exactly as the author understood it and wanted to convey it to you.
And we want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought to chew on as you go about your day.
Oh, the final command.
Yes. We talked extensively about how Jesus is the ultimate agent, the primary actor, the one issuing commands with zero modality. But look at how the text actually ends. It ends with a final hortatory command. Jesus doesn't walk up to Lazarus and take the bandages off himself.
No, he
He
don't.
looks at the crowd of mourners and says, "Untie him and let him go."
That is a profound, easily overlooked detail, especially when we consider the strict social scientific models of honor and purity we discussed earlier.
Jesus commands the stunned, skeptical, terrified community to actively participate in the miracle.
He makes them do it.
He forces them to step past their rigid purity laws, past their deeply ingrained fear of the stench of death, past their own skepticism, and unbind the grave clothes with their own hands. He forces the community to literally reach out and touch the impossible.
It's incredible.
Which makes me wonder, if language shapes reality, and if we are supposed to participate in the realities these texts describe, how much of our own understanding of what is possible is limited simply because we aren't paying attention to the grammar of the stories we live by?
That is a question worth deep, ongoing reflection.
We started this deep dive by talking about how reading a historical text is often treated like looking through a perfectly clear window binary, visible, easy. But we've seen today that it's actually a complex landscape.
It's deep waters.
But when you have the right tools, when you take the time to understand the discourse, the aspect, the syntax, the cultural framework, those muddy waters clear up, and you see a picture far more profound, far more challenging, and far more beautiful than you ever expected. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.